what to expect, other fun stuff that happened in camp. It wasn't just the action on the field. There's a bunch of off the field stuff as well. And if you've got any comments, hey man, throw them in. We'd love to have your comments and we'll answer your questions the best we can as we hang out to tell you about day 5 at training camp. Well, we start with the pads. And the pads, they were a poppin', according to Sean Payton. He talked about how intensity turns up when you're in the pads.
I think a lot more. And there's been so many cases that I can recall where the pads defined a player positively and sometimes negatively. But what you typically see early on with pads, and we're going to watch it on tape. Today our pad level, I'm sure, is going to be higher than we want it to be, both offensively and defensively. And I'm talking about the interior lines, but it's significantly different.
To that point.
Yeah, indeed. It's a little bit different. And the defense basically dominated. So not basically, they definitely dominated. And, from everything that we've been told, this sort of thing is not unusual. This is the advantage the defense has. And that's the way it goes. So hold on one second. Just trying to get everybody set up here. So more or less, it was the day that the defense took control and ruled the day. So perhaps it was even unfair to have Bo Nix in the mix itself as the starter, but that was the case today. What happens tomorrow is anybody's guess. So if we're talking about a dominant defensive day, let's talk to the guys on defense, including John Franklin Myers, new acquisition from the Jets, who shine.
We set the tone, so that's what it is. We're going to set the tone every day. When game time, we're expected to set the tone.
You being a physical player, though, how much are you able to even kind of rise up and show that physicality, obviously, with the pads on?
Yeah, I think, you kind of take a little bit more of a mental approach without the pads, but you understand that the physicality still is there. And at the end of the day, this game is played with pads on. So, you kind of understand that. There's times and a place for everything, but physicality is something that, you just have to go out there. And if you're a physical player like me, I don't need to practice every day to know that when it's time to go, put pads on, I'm going to be physical. That's what it is.
So the interior of the defensive line is absolutely critical for their success. And perhaps it is an advantage that the defense has a good day when they're supposed to have a good day. And today was simply a day they were supposed to have a good day. And that's exactly what happened. So probably not that bad of a deal that the offense didn't play great. Probably not that big of a deal that Bo Nix didn't have his best day, especially on Saturday when he played pretty well. And, frankly, if the next couple days don't go great for the offense, likely no need to panic. In fact, perhaps just the opposite. If today is a day where a rookie quarterback comes in and dominates and shows up your defense, you might have some issues. Chris Dempsey joins us as well. Chris, it's great to see you, my friend. Good evening. Hello. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. Can you hear me? Everything's good?
I got you. If you got me, I got you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Now, the defense dominated today. Overall observations about the defense, Chris?
Well, look, I think for Broncos fans, if you're watching today's practice, you came away fairly pleased with what you saw defensively, especially along that defensive line. They caused a little bit of havoc in that offensive backfield, in some of the 7-on-7s and those type of drills. And so, look, I think that it's a good sign that the Broncos defense might be a smidge ahead of the offense right now.
Right.
especially given the quarterbacks all trying to play catch up a little bit to the system. But defensively, they looked pretty good.
Here's Mike McGlinchey speaking on
certainly his maturity is something that everybody is speaking to. He's learned fast on the job, and he's a very competitive dude, and he takes a lot of pride in not screwing things up, or if he does once, he's not going to do it again. He takes the little small details, such as like the cadence. It's tough when he's always coming out asking the rest of us, hey, how can I do that better? How can I do this better? Bo's been an impressive person in our locker room, both as a player. I think he's picking things up incredibly fast and doing a great job. But as a competitor and as a teammate, he's done a great job too. So I think Bo's on the right track. I think he's gonna take the coaching that he's gonna get. He's got some of the best in the world helping him out, and I think he's gonna do great things for us.
Okay, what did Bo look like today, Chris?
Yeah, he looked okay. I mean, he had his moments, but he had a fumble. He looked like a rookie. We are barely into the start of training camp, and he is. I think he has had the entire spectrum of stuff there on the field, whether it's a bad interception or whether it's touchdown passes in the red zone or whether it's, So I think he looks fine. DMac, I think you know me. I'm a process guy. And so it's going to be a process. I mean, he's got to learn all the things at once. He's got to get to the NFL, understand what it means to be a professional. He's got to learn what is by all accounts, a pretty intricate system that Sean Payton runs offensively. We hear former players say this all the time. It takes a couple of years to even get this down to a space where you feel comfortable. He's got a quarterback competition happening around him as well. And so there's just a lot happening in Bo Nix's kind of orbit. And so, I guess what I mean here is I'm not going to overreact for one kind of day over another. So if he has a bad day, you're not going to see me overreact to that. If he has a great day, I'll smile about that because I really actively want him to succeed. But I can't overreact to that either, not this early. I think it's very encouraging when Mike McGlinchey gets on in front of people and says, hey, look, he's basically just a sponge and he wants to learn. He doesn't want to make the same mistake twice. We've heard Bo Nix over the weekend basically talk about not trying to – he doesn't want to come in and just be a backup. He wants to come in and really push to be the guy. So I just think those are all really good signs. And as we watch him over the course of the training camp, I just think that we want to see some of the mistakes, if he's making them early, obviously just be less of those as we get closer to the regular season.
Yeah, here is what Bo said on Saturday.
It's all about being confident, and sometimes you do take a risk, and sometimes it doesn't work out for you, but those you minimize and you learn from. But at the same time, you don't want to be a gun-shy quarterback. So no matter what, just have great confidence in the plays and the players and go out there and execute it. And if it's not.
So there you go. That's the right type of confidence, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I mean, he comes from a system in Oregon, a very confident head coach, a very confident system, right? If you watch Oregon play, I mean, they play with swagger. They play, they're constantly pushing the envelope. And I just think that as he gets more comfortable in this system, he's going to be able to do some of the same things. And I know the Broncos, hopefully, they hope they have some of the right weapons around him. Time will see. In terms of that, but I think he's made of the right stuff, DMac. I really do. I don't know what you think about this, but I really love hearing him talk, hearing him speak with confidence, hearing him we can hear his train of thought, how he goes about doing things, and it all sounds really, really good. And then when he gets on the field, he definitely wants to not make mistakes, and if he's making them, he wants to reduce them. So I'm very excited about him, to be honest with you.
You know what's interesting and important too is developing some sort of chemistry with everybody. And I do wonder if things with the Broncos, Chris, have been so screwy over the years. And when I see little glimpses of bonding together, it is encouraging. McGlinchey talked about why, for him, the deal with Quinn Miners
certainly
is so good.
His maturity is something that everybody is.
And here we go. Yeah,
He's so great already, and he's just scratching the surface of what he's going to be. And the two of us being able to be here, for the next at least 4 years together is really, really cool. And it's an opportunity to grow together, to understand the scheme together, to understand how each other plays and how we can make each other better. And we already started to do that last year. And Quinn's as good of a partner as you could ask for from an offensive tackle standpoint, both obviously as a dominant player, but his work ethic, him as a teammate, the way he carries himself. Quinn's an impressive dude all around. And Denver Broncos and Mike McGlinchey are very lucky to have him for the next 4 years.
Oh, he just dropped himself in the third person, Chris. He just put McGlinchey as McGlinchey.
That's true.
Wow.
Look, look, man, I am also a follow the money guy, and the Broncos has poured so much money into the offensive line. And look, when Sean Payton first got here, I mean, they dove right into free agency, and it was Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey. And they paid them not an exorbitant amount of money, but they paid them. And so you knew right off the top that they put a lot of value on both lines, but certainly the offensive line first. And they obviously continued on down that road with, an $80 million contract over 4 years for Quinn Miners. And so, look, DMac, how many of the offseason rankings have we seen the Broncos rostered rated 30th or 31st or 30, whatever.
Right.
But when you start to break down the position groups, the offensive line is the one position group that that you can see higher up on the scale. And I think Pro Football Focus had them ranked 15th in the NFL. So right smack dab in the middle. I think there's a lot of faith in this offensive line. There's a lot of year two. I would expect even bigger jump from that unit, even with the center's position being a little bit in flux. And I don't think the offensive line is a worry here for this football team when you're looking at where it needs to go.
Coach Mike Sanford joins us. Appreciate you, Coach. Thanks for being here.
I'll tell you what, man. God is good. Power went right back on.
Do you want to explain briefly what's going on in your home?
Yeah, I don't know if it was affiliated at all with this Northern Colorado fire that's going on, which is getting crazy. It seems closer than I probably would like, but about 5,500 people's power went out about an hour ago.
Sorry to hear that. That's awful.
And I was excited. I was fired up to be on this podcast. I'm like, I don't know. And if you live in Weld County, you also know that the old cell service isn't always so good. So going the phone route wasn't going to be an option. I was actually walked across the street to a field and stood on top of like an old like sprinkler system trying to hold up my phone ET style to see if I could get cell service. And I literally tried, like I logged on 5 times trying to get in, but nothing.
Unbelievable.
But
well, you're here. You're here now. You're here now. Overall observations on the day, Coach.
Yeah, it just wasn't a great offensive day. It was, I would say, very on brand for first day in pads with a veteran defense, a defense that's been through it together. I think that first unit defensively throughout the entirety of camp has been very solid. I don't think that's just indicative of the first day of pads. I think that the defensive front is the positive storyline of this entire camp, and the competition going on at the edge position, at linebacker, the rotation at interior defensive lineman, really positive. I think today was a day where I understand more now about 3 quarterbacks, because whether you like it or not, Jarrett Stidham gives you the best chance to win a game. I'd say if you look at the body work from OTAs into 5 days of training camp.
Well, I did have that chat with Troy Rank, and he wrote about it over the weekend in the Denver Post. My concept is that it's not a competition, it's a decision, because I don't think you're going to see separation per se. I think you're going to see the same thing out of these 3 guys we've been seeing the entire time. So that's not a competition. Nobody's going to beat each other out. You've got to make up your mind, Coach. Like, what do you want to start the season?
Yeah, I think, DMac, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it is a little bit of a competition because, you need the individuals to go out on the field and push each other. You need both. If Bo Nix is the player that you want to start, then you need Jarrett Stidham to push him to be the man. So I think from the the foundation of you want these guys feeling each and every day as if their job is kind of on the line. It's a little bit of a competition there. Now, look, it is obviously a decision because this is an active operation of a team that is trying to push forward into whatever future it wants to have. And look, the future it wants to have is with Bo Nix. So the decision really is, are you going to put that player on the field kind of regardless of what he looks like in training camp, or are you going to make him show a little more before you put him on the field? Because ultimately, obviously, he is the future.
Mike?
DMac, where I would disagree with you with regards to nothing will change. I don't agree with that. Why even have training camp if nobody's going to show any signs of growth and nobody's going to show that they're using these days that are stacked back to back to back, unlike OTAs and minicamp, which are small, just spurts of football. I think there's going to be there's going to be the wave. Like even Saturday was a day for me for Bo Nix, where he did look really good in the red zone, where he did make some really good decisions and bounce back after a very slow start with the interception he threw. That was a day where I was like, I see what at least Sean Payton drafted here in Bo Nix. And I think that the longer this thing goes, the guy that I think is going to potentially look better and better and better is Zach Wilson. And I think it's just because this is a reclamation project. This is a rebuild of what's between the ears of Zach Wilson. And as we keep hearing, from people inside the NFL and just the general observations is that whatever he was taught in New York, at the very best, he was taught a bunch of different things from a bunch of different people, and there were just a lot of voices in his ear. At the worst, I think that he got ruined. I mean, that's 3 years as a starter getting thrown into the wolves. He got ruined, but he doesn't look ruined. He looks like a quarterback that's in a good spot. Understands who he is, understands what needs to be done, and isn't he's not the hothead that maybe he was in New York early on in his career. So I do think that the longer this competition goes, I actually think that the talent, the arm strength, the creativity as a passer, I think actually Zach Wilson will be a guy that might be surging at week 2, week 3. And he does have a lot of NFL experience. The other two guys don't have in-game experience. He's touched the hot stove way too much. In fact, he almost lost his entire hand from touching the stove. And I think that he's a guy that potentially could end up surging as this camp goes on.
On the comments, P, the future we want is with Bo, but why? Is it just because he was the 12th overall? If all three are so even, then why want one over the other? Chris, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think that's the reason why. He's the 12th. I don't know how to say it any other way.
It's not that complicated.
Right. When you draft a player that high and you do that with the idea that he's going to be your future. And, look, there was another comment, I think it was from P as well. The reason I kind of discount Zach Wilson and Stidham is only because I just want to get to the future part now. And let's just get the clock started right now. And those two players, if either one of those two players, so to go back to your quarterback competition, if either one of those two players was truly competing to be the franchise quarterback, then we're having a different conversation. But I don't, what we're looking at in the preseason, Zach Wilson might play great, Stidham might play great, but ultimately, down the road, I don't think it really matters. If you're trying to win a couple of games early in a football season this year, okay, it matters. But if you're trying to get a guy, your 12th overall pick, up to speed quickly so that he can become what you think he can become, then you got to get that individual on the field as fast as you possibly can.
Guys, we had to go ahead, Coach.
Debs, you and I talk about all this all the time. You're a process guy, right? Yeah. And you love the process. Like, you don't just want the process. Like, you really embrace every aspect of the process. And I do think part of the process for Sean Payton, as it relates to Bo Nix, is the timing of when he's inserted as the starter. Yeah. Because you have to look at it from like the long game of Bo Nix. You throw him to the Wolves at Seattle. He's not prepared and hasn't really even gained the trust of his teammates, not because he's not a trustworthy individual. He is certainly that. He's an accountable individual. He's a hardworking individual. He's got a great head on his shoulders, but it's going to be about what you've done on the field. I call it field credibility. And if he doesn't have that field credibility built up in time for the Seattle game, and then a lot of that's going to be the preseason games, even the joint practice with the Packers, I think is going to show a lot. If the process doesn't really stack up for Bo Nix to be successful, well, then here you go with another graveyard list of quarterbacks that have been drafted by the Broncos and other franchises that haven't worked out, and they're either out of football or they're on to their next team. And I'm not saying that's going to be Bo Nix, but if you're not careful with when you choose to put him in within the process, as you talked about, then I think you set him up for, taking some scars that maybe you can't come back from.
Is there a magic answer when to insert him?
I don't think so. I mean, I think
I don't think so either.
I think he'll show you. Okay, he'll show you on the field, and
I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, just he'll show you on the field if he's ready to go, or if he's ready to even just be out there in a way that doesn't kind of ruin him for the future, as Coach has just said. And outside of that, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think the last quarterback that didn't start the first game of the year. That was a young quarterback, and then it was on. I've thought about this recently. That did come in, say, week 5, 6, or 7, and then had success that year. Anybody recently? There is somebody, and I'm
Mahomes didn't start the whole year until the last game against the Broncos, so that wasn't like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good one. Like, who sat out for like 5 weeks?
Was it Josh Allen?
Allen, I got to go back and look at it. I don't think he might not have started like the first 2 or 3 games. I don't think it went as long as that. I believe Tyrod Taylor was there at the time, but again, I'd have to go back and check that out. I'm not sure about it.
That's actually, I think, a really good case study to dive into here in the next couple of days. Is how many situations have quarterbacks where the franchise needs him to play? Like, that's a reality. The Broncos need.
Well, let me say this. Good. If you're going to lose, I mean, why lose with Stidham? Why lose with Zach Wilson if you're going to lose?
You talk about the magic number, okay? The Broncos, this is not the Carolina Panthers. This is a proud fan base that is tired of the last 8-9 seasons, that wants to freaking win. And they want to freaking win right now. They also want hope. And so the magic number, process-wise, from a coach, and you have to think it's not just solely the on-the-field production. Right. It's also the optics. And the magic number for me is however long Jarrett Stidham needs to start to make it look like Bo Nix is the savior that we've all been wanting, because the football is so bad. And if you think that's fake, that's not fake. That's a real thing. Where Stidham's out there, and frankly, he's not going to suck, but he's not going to do anything to win you games. Like, he had 2 opportunities to start against 2 interim head coaches and basically 2 non-NFL starters, Easton Stick and Aiden O'Connell.
That's right.
And he went 500. Okay. And both those teams were in a similar situation, a worse situation, because you have Sean Payton on as part of the build, and a team that was really knocking on the door in the Broncos of the playoffs. This wasn't a completely, awful situation for Stiddy to walk into. And I think he showed his cards. Like, he's a guy that is solid. He's going to play within the system. Does he give you anything extra? Show me an NFL starting quarterback that's a top 15 quarterback that doesn't give you something extra, whether it's Lamar Jackson's athleticism, Joe Burrow's creativity as a passer, even Jared Goff's pinpoint accuracy. I mean, there's nothing necessarily I see with Jarrett Stidham where it's something extra, where I do think Bo Nix has something extra, and someone showed up at practice today. His wheels, the dude can freaking run, and he can run physically. Now, the thing that nobody wants to report from my vantage point, both of those scramble plays were sacks. I mean, they were tap off on the hip 3 times, and he takes off, and the fans are going crazy. Look how fast he looks. I mean, that's going to show up at some point that he can run in a game. And I think it's going to be the magic number is whenever Jarrett Stidham, it just looks like, hey, this team is going nowhere. It's an uphill battle. You're swimming upstream. That's when you insert Bo Nix, and he's going to be better.
Chris, if I didn't know better, I think Coach Sanford just called the fans idiots. I'm not sure about that, but I'd have to maybe go back and check the tape right there.
Hey, man,
But
hey, when you've lived on this platform X for a long time in your life, and you have to deal as a head coach and an offensive coordinator with some of these people's comments in your DMs and your mentions, you don't always have the warmest of things to say about these every one of these fans. Although I love the fans. The fans are the best.
I'm sure
they're the best. I love them.
Let's hear a remarkable piece of audio. This is with John Elway from that big Lake Tahoe golf tournament.
So your victory lap keeps going. Is that what we're doing here?
Yeah, it doesn't stop, ladies and gentlemen. John Elway, take it away.
Get Josh Allen. I feel like he is exactly your type.
I know he is, and believe me, last year I played with him, and I'm wondering how long is it going to take him to realize that I passed on him and took Bradley and Chubb instead?
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it took him 2.5 holes to bring it up and I loved him, right?
Yeah.
But it just
he was your type.
That's the was my type, and you're right. That was probably my biggest mistake of my GM days was not taking Josh.
Woo! I'm glad to hear it because it was obvious at the time, and boy, did that set the franchise back, Chris.
Yeah, it really did. I kind of described it on the our show today as a little bit of a gut punch, and in addition to the gut punch that happened when he didn't actually draft him in that draft, just because we watched him play. I mean, if you live around here, like you watch college football around here, Wyoming is always on. Wyoming is always present in the front range football landscape. And so we got to see Josh Allen just up close. We saw John Elway literally in Wyoming standing. I'll never forget standing kind of in the end zone, or it's not the end zone, but right behind the end zone in one of his games. And it was just, you thought all signs were kind of pointing toward him making that pick. But I listen, I also get it from the standpoint that, John Elway, if we go back to when he drafted Von Miller, and one of the things that he said was, I knew what kind of defensive individuals gave me problems as a quarterback in this league, and I wanted to create a defense that would give quarterbacks problems that gave me problems. So Bradley Chubb then would have been part 2 of the Von Miller story when you're trying to get those kind of individuals on your defense. Maybe he just overthought it. Sometimes it's just as easy as take the quarterback in your backyard that's playing great, that's kind of a clone of you, and he didn't do it.
Coach, the one thing that is painful for people to see that, and okay, hey, John is making it a mission. It's good to hear, but you have to understand something, Coach, and you can speak to it. John Elway did not go to his pro day. Now, why does that matter? Well, because between the Senior Bowl, which we were all at and the Broncos were coaching at, Coach, and his pro day was a chunk of time. Not a huge chunk, but a chunk of time. But what did he do, Josh Allen, do between that time? He got with Jordan Palmer, and trained. And at his pro day, and I was at both, and Elway wasn't. Elway didn't even go to his pro day. And I get it, pro day is controlled. But if you see the comparison between where he went from the Senior Bowl to the pro day with specific NFL training with Jordan Palmer, my man, it would have blown your mind. But guess what? You would have had to be there to see it. And John Elway did not take the time to go see it.
Yeah, there's your victory lap. What's interesting, DMac? So a good friend of mine, actually a guy that was my coach when I was a coach, he was my agent. He transitioned out of the coaching landscape because his big client failed miserably and started representing players. And one of the guys that he represented and still does to this day is Brock Purdy. And very similar to Brock Purdy, everybody wonders how's this guy who's now potentially going to be one of the highest paid players in the NFL over the course of the next year or two, how did this guy go from being Mr. Irrelevant? How did everybody miss in the scouting process? Well, I got a little information when I was down in Mobile having dinner with my former agent that after actually the draft and after OTAs and mini camps, my agent set him up in Florida with this PhD in kinesiology. He's not even a football guy. That he taught him how to unlock his lower half as a thrower. And that's the Brock Purdy that we see now playing for the 49ers from a mechanics perspective. is nothing like the Brock Purdy that worked out at even at the Senior Bowl or at Pro Day, at the Combine. If I don't even know if he was invited, but this does happen, DMac. You bring up a good point. Like, you have to get every bit of data along the way.
Yes.
And that's one thing, like, for me, this was my first year of going through this process. I was at Senior Bowl. I went to the Combine. The one bit of data I didn't have, just because my wife was about ready to, she wanted me out of the house, but not for the entire months of February and March and April.
Okay.
But the one thing that I didn't get to was pro days, and a lot does change. There are a lot of things that you can learn. A lot of my take on Bo Nix as a guy that I think has deficient arm talent is the Combine. And the Combine is the one place where you can see him throw side by side with other first-round draft quarterbacks. And in this case, it was him, J.J. McCarthy, and Michael Penix Jr. And that's where I largely formed my final opinion, which was also based on Senior Bowl. It was also based on film study. So, I would have, if I would have come out of the Combine, certainly I'm going to the pro day, which is exactly what Sean Payton did. He had a private pro day.
That's right. That's right. And so, not to pile on John here, I've done that for literally years, but to say, hey, compliments to the Broncos now, an ownership GM coach who are on the same page and checked every single box to the nth degree about Bo Nix. So if Bo Nix doesn't work out, it's not because there wasn't due diligence, and it wasn't because they didn't like him. They loved him.
DMac, I would argue with you on the owner, general manager, and head coach being on the same page. I think that Sean Payton is on the same page with Sean Payton. And that's not a bad thing. It really isn't a bad thing. When you give the head coach, and typically these are head coaches that have won Super Bowls, that have the experience to command that level of respect in the building. But when you essentially give them the keys to the car to make the selection they want to make, that's never a bad thing. That's exactly what Jim Harbaugh wanted when he went to the National Football League. He wanted to have, essentially drafting control, and that's what Sean Payton has here. And I think that that's the ownership group making a wise decision with regards to bringing in a head coach that has actually been there and done that. And
How about this? They're on the same process. There you go, Chris. They agree about the process.
Yeah.
So
Sean
when
Payton's
I say,
process.
okay, fine, but Sean Payton wasn't working out the scraps that were handed over to Cortland Sutton so he could feel okay about playing this year. And yeah, it's scraps. I know 1.7 million or whatever. That's weird to say is scrap, but look at what the rest of the wide receivers make. I think Sean Payton has certain things that he wants, but he also needs help doing other things. Who's going to find that backup punter in the punting competition?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
If Mitchell Frabroni doesn't work out, if he's a jabroni, not a frabroni, who's going to get that long snapper? Who are going to find these guys?
But you know what? To both of you guys' point here, I also think that Sean Payton bets on himself as a guy who develops talent at the quarterback position, and so he can go to a pro day and see some maybe deficiencies in Bo Nix. And if they're not so glaring that he doesn't feel like he can fix all of them, then he goes, just looks at himself in the mirror and says, okay, this guy checks these 5 boxes, these 3 boxes, I can help him check over time. And, so it's, I think we got a little bit of both here. And so, I think Sean Payton is, he's Bill Parcells, kind of like he's going buying the groceries and cooking the food, but he's also, I think, a coach that believes in his heart that he can get a player to a space, and I think that's the one area that when we talk about Sean Payton, how many times have we heard he doesn't play rookies, he has never developed a quarterback, blah 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 blah. I think he just laughs in the face of that and says, we'll just see.
Yeah, I don't want to minimize George Payton's role, because I do believe that George Payton, league wide, is respected as an evaluator of college talent. I mean, he cut his teeth as a college scout. Has a ton of respect within the National Football League of being thorough and diligent, and so I do think that Sean Payton respects George Payton's opinion and how he goes about his process in employing the scouting department to get the right information and data to Sean Payton to ultimately make decisions. And I'll say this, I think even the Zach Wilson thing, everybody kind of thinks, what was that? I'll say this, as a guy that's a quarterback, I considered myself a good evaluator and developer of quarterbacks, and I don't have to go through which guys I coached and who ended up in the NFL, but there was nothing that I enjoyed more as a quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, even head coach, than taking the guy that nobody else wanted and then seeing him to becoming a conference champion, an NFL draft pick, and then looking at everybody else and be like, haha, I'm smarter than you guys. I mean, there's an arrogance, there's an ego that does come with this position. And I've lived that. I lived that with a kid named Ian Book at Notre Dame. Nobody recruited Ian Book. He ended up being the all-time winningest quarterback in the history of Notre Dame, played for Sean Payton at the Saints. So those are the things I think as a coach, you have two quarterbacks on this roster. One was a failed first-round draft pick in Zach Wilson 3 years in. Kind of nobody wanted him. Well, we've seen him out there. He's pretty freaking talented. And then you got a guy that was the sixth quarterback taken, still in the first round, still in the top 12. It's only happened like one other time in the history of the draft. Either one of those guys works out, Sean Payton looks like the genius.
Sure.
And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all.
All I can say is when it comes to getting some ice cream after dinner, Jordan Love better pick up the tab for you. That's all I'm saying. I know you don't want to mention anybody but name, but, give me a break. Well, let's talk about Sean Payton just for a second as we wrap it up. We appreciate everybody listening. So you take things with Slim Shawnee with a grain of salt. Here is Sean on Saturday.
Sean, are you going to see Kenny Chesney tonight?
We'll see. We got so much going on. Now, interestingly enough, it falls where we have an off day, but it was good to have him.
We'll see, huh? Later that night. I guess he found some time to
Free
be on
bird,
stage.
baby, free bird.
Now, here's what you got to love about Sean Payton. He loves Sean-splaining everything. I mean, everything. So here's a classic Sean Payton from today, breaking down Playing at Empower Field by Kenny Chesney. Ready? Hang on. Sean's about to explain music.
I'm not sure 48,000 might be your break-even number. I mean, when you take on that type of challenge, then there's more at stake, and it's been unbelievable to see someone like that who's now 56 years old. We've known each other for 22 years, and there was a point, not when I was on stage, but there was a point earlier when I just looked up and thought, man, every seat's filled here, and I think when you look at the song list, he's at 36, I think, number ones. And so the show ends and there's 5 that, hey, didn't get to this. Well, you can't get to them all. But it was impressive. It was impressive that night for me to be at our stadium in that environment, different than, because I was asked by a number of people in his group, is it the same? And for us, it's different. I've headsets on, it's different. But it was really impressive to see the turnout, and in that stadium, I'd only been to football games in that stadium. In fact, I coached in the first football game ever played in that stadium, Monday Night Football, the day before 9/11, and that's when Ed McCaffrey broke his leg. I was the young offensive coordinator for the Giants that night, so that was 2001. I believe. And there was only one other event prior to that event. John Cougar Mellencamp, I think 2 weeks earlier, played in that stadium. So I got a pretty good memory.
Well, how about that? Nearly 2 minutes explaining the Kenny Chesney concert that a lot of people like Kenny Chesney. But that is a little window into the soul, isn't it, Coach? Like, he breaks everything down.
It's so funny. The one thing that I think all coaches and all players have in common is that we have major musician and rock star envy, because it's just like there's just a different level of just knowing that you're going to go out there in front of a packed stadium or packed arena,
right,
and you're just going to go play the songs you've been playing time and time again, and everybody's going to lose their ever living mind. It's like the greatest feeling in the world. Whereas a football coach and a player, you got to be ready for the booze. You got to be ready for people blogging and doing these stupid live streams like we do, telling you you're an idiot if you don't make every single play the right way. You don't call the right plays. Being a rock star, man, all athletes, Christian McCaffrey being up there with Zach Bryan at Red Rocks and singing on stage. And there's so many different examples of athletes just wanting to be a part of the rock star life.
Yep.
Well, there you go. Okay, other notes at camp today. Welcome to the alums that made it there. That was cool. Happens every year. And let me just leave it open to you guys. Any final thoughts? Any little nuggets? Any little things that nobody else picked up on? Chris, just your camp observations about today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying nobody picked up on this because I think people are picking up on this, but I've been very, very happy to see Greg Dulcich out there. And this was a player that Sean Payton literally had a role, like a Joker role, right? There was the Joker role last season, picked out and wanted to really see what he can do in terms of being a player that he can move around and be a real nuisance to other defenses. So it's just been really nice to see Greg Dulcich out there running around. Me and Coach were looking at him. I mean, he's a hoss, man. Like that. He is a specimen out there. So hopefully he can stay healthy.
Coach,
a player that I have continued to just watch show up, and you could say he would be a fan favorite because of being from a small school and non-scholarship program at University of San Diego, is Michael Bandy. I've been really impressed with him as just that sure-handed, just savvy route runner, finds ways to settle in zones. Practice squad, I believe, a year ago. And just a guy that I could see the dependability, the reliability, and if this offense is a bit more of kind of moving the ball down the field in small chunks, I think he would be a perfect guy to create separation on option routes. So I'm kind of high on Michael Bandy. I really like what I see out of him, and he could be the next one in a great line of slots that have played in the Broncos organization and other places. One other thing, DMac, that I saw and have witnessed over the course of 3-4 days is whoever's gone with the first team offense as a quarterback has struggled that day. And it's because they're seeing a real NFL first team defense.
Right.
I'd say right in the middle of the pack NFL defense. And whichever quarterback over the next week or two before you get into preseason games shows some real snap as a first team, that day as the starter with the first unit. To me, that's the guy who gets the leg up in this competition.
Guys, we'll be back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock for day 6. Full pads we anticipate tomorrow, and we appreciate everybody paying attention. That's great. We'll have extensive coverage for you on Altitude Sports Radio 92.5. And if you had any wonder and closing thoughts about why it's better to be a rock star than an athlete, nobody ever threw panties at a football coach.
That is a fact. And fellas, no one ever will.
Fellas, we'll see you. We'll see you.
I got
tomorrow.
a bra once going back into the tunnel. Just saying.
Just saying. Wow. Story time tomorrow night. All right. We'll see you. Bye.